I'm standing in my corner office looking down at the resume spread across my mahogany desk. Amanda Thompson. The name hits me like a punch to the gut, even though I've been expecting this moment for weeks. 5 years ago, my parents threw me out during my 20th birthday dinner, choosing my sister over me in the cruelest way possible. They told me Amanda had potential while I had none. Now she's here desperate for a job, not knowing that the CEO she's about to meet is her brother Larry. The irony burns through me as I remember sleeping in my car, coughing blood while she got everything our parents could give. I buzz my secretary, and my voice stays steady despite the storm inside me. Send Miss Thompson in. The door opens, and Amanda walks through, freezing when she sees me. Her face drains of color, and she whispers my name in complete disbelief. The memory takes me back 5 years to Romano's Italian restaurant on my 20th birthday. The red checkered tablecloths, the smell of garlic bread, and what I thought would be a celebration. My parents, Robert and Susan, sat across from me with Amanda beside them, looking uncomfortable in her new dress. I should have known something was wrong when they picked such an expensive place for my birthday. Dad never spent money unless he had bad news to deliver. My father, Robert, cleared his throat and adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, the way he always did before giving me another lecture about my failures. He was a successful accountant who measured everything in numbers, including his children's worth. My mother, Susan, fidgeted with her pearl necklace. The same nervous habit she'd developed since quitting her nursing job to focus entirely on Amanda's academic pursuits. Larry, we need to discuss your future. Dad began cutting his veal with surgical precision. Amanda received her acceptance letter to Stanford yesterday. Full scholarship to their pre-med program. I forced a smile and looked at my sister. At 18, Amanda was everything I wasn't. Straight A student, valedictorian, perfect SAT scores, and the kind of natural beauty that made people stop and stare. Her blonde hair caught the restaurant's dim lighting as she avoided my eyes. That's incredible, Amanda. Congratulations, I said, meaning it despite the knot forming in my stomach. Thank you, she whispered, still not looking at me. Dad continued as if I hadn't spoken. Meanwhile, you've spent 2 years at community college studying business with barely passing grades. Your mother and I have made a decision. The knot in my stomach tightened into a fist. What kind of decision? Mom finally spoke, her voice shaking slightly. We're selling the house, Larry. Amanda needs funding for medical school after her undergraduate degree. The costs are enormous. I set down my fork, no longer hungry. Okay, but what does that mean for me? Dad leaned forward, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. It means we're investing our resources where they'll do the most good. Amanda has the potential to save lives as a doctor. You barely passed high school algebra and show no signs of academic improvement. The words hit me like physical blows. I'm studying business. I have plans. Plans? Dad's voice rose enough that other diners glanced over. You've changed majors 3 times, and your grades are mediocre at best. We can't afford to support dead weight anymore. Robert, Mom warned quietly, but she didn't defend me. I'm not dead weight, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I just need more time to figure things out. Dad pulled out a manila folder I hadn't noticed before. We've already made the arrangements. The house goes on the market next week. We're moving into a smaller apartment to reduce expenses. There won't be room for you. The restaurant suddenly felt too hot, too bright, too loud. You're kicking me out? We're encouraging independence, Mom said, finally meeting my eyes. Maybe some real-world experience will motivate you to find your true calling. Amanda spoke for the first time since congratulating her. Mom, maybe we should discuss other options. But Dad cut her off with a wave of his hand. The decision is final. Amanda represents our family's future. She'll make us proud in ways you never could. That's when I made the mistake of asking the question that shattered whatever remained of my childhood illusions. What about Grandma Helen's inheritance? She left money for both of us for college. The silence that followed felt like a physical presence at our table. Mom's face went pale, and Dad's jaw tightened so much I could see the muscles working under his skin. That money has been invested in Amanda's education, Dad said flatly. SAT preparation courses, college application consultants tutoring, and a reliable car for her to get to Stanford. Investments that have paid off. I stared at him in disbelief. Grandma left that money specifically for both of us. You spent my half without even telling me it existed. We made executive decisions about family resources. Dad replied his accountant's mind. Reducing my grandmother's love to a line item. Amanda's success validates those choices. I looked around the table at these three people who shared my DNA but felt like strangers. Amanda was studying her untouched pasta, while Mom dabbed her eyes with her napkin. Dad continued eating as if he hadn't just destroyed his son's life with casual efficiency. So that's it, I asked. 20 years of being your son, and you're throwing me away because I'm not perfect like Amanda? We're not throwing you away, Mom said weakly. We're helping you grow up. But her words carried no conviction. I could see the truth in her eyes. They had chosen their golden child, and I was just an expensive mistake they needed to correct. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. This is unbelievable. You're destroying my life to fund hers. Lower your voice, Dad hissed, glancing around at the other diners. No, I said louder. I want everyone to hear this. These people just told their son he has no potential, while their daughter is worth everything. Amanda finally looked up, tears streaming down her perfect face. Larry, please don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My own parents just told me I'm worthless, and you're worried about embarrassment. Dad stood up now, his face flushed red. You're proving our point right now. Amanda would never create this kind of drama. Amanda has never been told she doesn't matter. You matter, Mom said, but her voice was so quiet I barely heard her. Then act like it, I shot back. Give me the same chances you've given her. Use half the inheritance for my education like Grandma intended. That money is gone, Dad said with finality. And even if it wasn't, we wouldn't waste it on someone who can't appreciate the opportunities he's already squandered. I looked at each of them one more time. Mom crying into her napkin, Dad rigid with righteous anger, and Amanda beautiful and silent and complicit in her perfection. Fine, I said, pulling out my wallet and throwing $20 on the table. Consider this my contribution to Amanda's future. It's the last cent you'll ever get from me. I walked toward the exit, hoping someone would call my name, ask me to come back, tell me this was all a horrible mistake. Instead, I heard Dad's voice carry across the restaurant. Don't come crawling back when reality hits you, Larry. We won't be there to clean up your messes anymore. I pushed through the heavy glass doors into the cool night air, and for the first time in my life, I was completely alone. 3 weeks after that dinner, I found myself sleeping in my beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot of a 24-hour Walmart in suburban Phoenix. The car smelled like fast food grease and desperation, but it was the only home I could afford. My savings from working part-time at an electronics store had been decimated by the security deposit on an apartment I never got to move into. The landlord had changed his mind when he realized I had no cosigner and minimal credit history. The Walmart parking lot became my neighborhood. I learned which spots the security guards ignored and how to rotate locations so I wouldn't get noticed. Other people lived in their cars too, but we maintained an unspoken code of privacy, never acknowledging each other's circumstances. My daily routine revolved around survival. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. drive to Planet Fitness for a $10 monthly membership that gave me access to showers and bathrooms. The gym employees pretended not to notice that I sometimes spent longer than necessary getting ready, or that I occasionally washed clothes in the sink. Work at Techmart Electronics started at 7. My manager Danny was a decent guy in his 40s, who'd inherited the store from his father. He noticed my deteriorating appearance, but attributed it to typical 20-year-old problems. I worked the opening shift unloading trucks and stocking shelves while fighting off exhaustion that seemed to seep into my bones. The fatigue started gradually. At first, I blamed it on sleeping in a car seat and eating nothing but dollar menu items. But after a month, I developed a persistent cough that left my chest aching. Night sweat soaked through my clothes, and I'd wake up shivering in the desert heat. I couldn't afford a doctor visit. The electronics store offered health insurance, but the deductible was $3,000, and my take-home pay barely covered gas and food. So I ignored the symptoms and told myself it was stress. The public library became my refuge during the hours between shifts. I'd sit at the computers pretending to job search while actually just enjoying air conditioning and the illusion of normalcy. Sometimes I'd watch families with small children at story time and remember what it felt like to belong somewhere. Amanda's social media posts tortured me with glimpses of my former life. Photos of family dinners at expensive restaurants, her new dorm room at Stanford, decorated with items I recognized from our childhood home, and selfies with other beautiful, successful students. Each image felt like a knife turning in an already infected wound. Mom and Dad appeared in the background of Amanda's photos, smiling and proud. They looked relaxed, happy, even as if the stress of supporting an underachieving son had been lifted from their shoulders. In one photo, Amanda wore our grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones Grandma had promised would be mine, to give to my future wife someday. My coworkers at TechMart started noticing changes. During lunch breaks, while they ate sandwiches from home, I'd disappear behind the store to eat expired food from the dumpster behind Subway. The manager there, a sympathetic college student named Jake, had started leaving unsold sandwiches in clean bags on top of the regular garbage. "You feeling okay, Larry?" Danny asked one afternoon, after watching me struggle to lift a box of televisions that shouldn't have been heavy for a 20-year-old. "Just tired," I lied, wiping sweat from my forehead despite the store's aggressive air conditioning. "You look like you've lost weight. You eating enough?" The concern in his voice almost broke me. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just stressed from some family stuff." Danny nodded, but kept watching me with worried eyes. I could see him calculating whether he should ask more questions or respect my privacy. Customers started noticing too. A middle-aged woman shopping for a tablet wrinkled her nose when I approached to help her. "Are you feeling well? You look quite pale." "I'm fine, ma'am. How can I help you today?" But I caught my reflection in the store's security monitors and saw what she saw. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under my eyes' skin that looked gray under the fluorescent lighting. I looked like someone dying, which I suppose I was. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. I'd spent the night coughing so hard that an elderly man parked 3 spaces away had knocked on my window to check if I needed an ambulance. I'd waved him off embarrassed and tried to muffle the sound with my jacket. At work, while moving a shipment of laptops from the truck to the stockroom, my vision suddenly blurred. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the concrete floor with Danny and 2 customers standing over me. My mouth tasted like copper, and there was blood on my shirt. "Call 911, Danny shouted to someone behind the crowd that had gathered. "No," I tried to say, but only a whisper came out. "I can't afford it." The ambulance ride to Good Samaritan Hospital cost $800 I didn't have. The emergency room visit would cost thousands more. But the alternative was dying in a stockroom, and even in my delirious state, I wasn't ready for that. The emergency room doctor was a tired-looking woman in her 50s named Dr. Martinez. She listened to my chest with cold efficiency, ordered X-rays, and drew enough blood to fill a small laboratory. "When did the coughing start?" she asked, making notes on a clipboard. "About 6 weeks ago." "Night sweats." "Yes." "Weight loss?" I nodded. "Any recent travel or exposure to infectious diseases?" "No, but I've been—" I hesitated, embarrassed to admit my living situation to this professional woman. with her clean white coat and obvious competence. "You've been what?" "Homeless," I whispered. Her pen stopped moving, and she looked up at me with different eyes. Not judgmental exactly, but calculating risk factors and infectious disease probabilities. The test results confirmed what I'd been dreading: tuberculosis. The very word sounded ancient and shameful, like something from a Dickens novel rather than modern America. Dr. Martinez explained the treatment with clinical detachment. 6 months of antibiotics, regular monitoring, isolation, until I was no longer contagious. She handed me pamphlets about county health services and housing assistance programs. "Do you have family who can help with housing during treatment?" she asked. "No." "Friends?" "No." She sighed and made another note. "I'll have social services contact you before discharge. There are options for people in your situation." That night, lying in a hospital bed with IV antibiotics flowing into my arm, I listened to the nurse call my parents' phone number from my emergency contact information. I heard every word through the thin privacy curtain. "Mr. Anderson, this is Sarah from Good Samaritan Hospital. Your son Larry was admitted today with tuberculosis, and we need to discuss his treatment plan and discharge options." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had been dropped. Then I heard my father's voice, distant but unmistakable, through the phone's speaker. "We don't have a son named Larry anymore. Don't call this number again." The line went dead. Sarah, a young nurse, who couldn't have been much older than me, stared at the phone in confusion. She tried calling back twice, but no one answered. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, pulling the curtain aside to look at me. "Sometimes families need time to process medical emergencies." I didn't have the energy to explain that it wasn't shock keeping my parents from my bedside. It was relief. The son they'd never wanted had finally disappeared completely, removing even the theoretical obligation to care about his welfare. Lying there, surrounded by beeping machines and the antiseptic smell of institutional cleaning supplies, I understood that my family had moved on without me. They'd probably already told their friends I was doing well, somewhere far away, studying business and figuring out my life. It was easier than admitting they'd thrown away a child like yesterday's newspaper. But staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles, something hardened inside my chest that had nothing to do with tuberculosis. They'd written me off as worthless, but they'd only seen one version of who I could become. The version shaped by their disappointment and diminished expectations. I was 20 years old, homeless, sick, and completely alone. But I was also free from their judgments and limitations. For the first time in my life, no one was telling me I wasn't good enough. Maybe that would be enough to build something from. The transitional housing facility looked like a converted motel from the 1970s, complete with orange carpet and wood paneling that had seen better decades. Desert Haven Recovery Center housed 42 people in various states of rebuilding their lives. My roommate was Marcus, a 60-year-old former aerospace engineer whose wife's cancer treatment had cost them everything they'd built over 30 years of marriage. Marcus had kind eyes behind thick glasses and spoke with the measured cadence of someone who'd spent his career explaining complex problems to impatient executives. He'd been at Desert Haven for 8 months, working part-time at a hardware store while trying to get back on his feet. "First time being homeless?" he asked on my initial night, watching me stare at the institutional bed with its thin mattress and rough sheets. "Yes, sir." "You'll learn. There are rules here, both written and unwritten. Follow them, and you'll be fine. Break them, and you'll be back on the street." The written rules filled 3 pages of small print. No alcohol, drugs, weapons, or violence. Mandatory participation in job search activities. Weekly meetings with assigned social workers. Lights out at 10, wake up at 6. Random room inspections and drug testing. The unwritten rules were more complex. Don't ask too many personal questions. Share food if you have extra. Never touch anyone else's belongings. Don't monopolize the television or computers. Respect that everyone here is fighting battles you can't see. My social worker was Beth, a woman in her early 30s who'd graduated from Arizona State with a master's degree in social work, and actually seemed to care about her clients rather than just processing paperwork. She had curly red hair that she kept trying to tame with hair ties, and freckles that made her look younger than her age. "Tell me about your goals, Larry," she said during our first meeting, a clipboard balanced on her knees in her cluttered office. "Survive treatment, find work, get my own place." Those are survival goals. I'm asking about life goals. What did you want to be before everything fell apart? I thought about it for a moment. I wanted to run my own business someday. Something in technology or consulting. I was studying business administration before. I trailed off. "Before your family kicked you out for not being perfect enough." Her directness surprised me. "You read my intake file." "I read everything. Your parents sound like real pieces of work, but that's their failure, not yours. Now, what kind of business did you want to start?" For the next hour, Beth drew out dreams I'd buried under months of survival mode. She helped me research online business courses I could take using the facility's computers, connected me with tutoring volunteers, and introduced me to other residents who were rebuilding professional lives. Carlos was 23, a construction worker who'd contracted tuberculosis from a contaminated job site and lost his apartment during treatment. He'd been at Desert Haven for 4 months and worked part-time for a small remodeling company whose owner didn't mind hiring people with complicated backgrounds. "The key is proving you're reliable," Carlos explained while we waited in line for dinner. "Show up on time, work hard, don't complain about the small stuff. Bosses don't care about your story if you can do the job." Carlos had a 3-year-old daughter named Sophia who lived with his ex-girlfriend across town. He showed me pictures of a beautiful little girl with his dark eyes and serious expression. Every penny he earned went toward child support and saving for his own apartment so he could petition for shared custody. "That's what keeps me going," he said, studying the photo on his cracked phone screen. "Sophia needs to see that her dad doesn't give up." The tuberculosis treatment was brutal in ways I hadn't expected. The antibiotics made me nauseated constantly, and some days I could barely keep down enough food to maintain my weight. Fatigue came in waves that left me feeling like I was swimming through thick water. But slowly, gradually, the coughing decreased and my appetite returned. Marcus became my unofficial mentor during evening hours when the facility's programming ended. We'd walk the perimeter of the property, a half-mile loop that took us past chain-link fencing and desert landscape that stretched toward distant mountains. I used to design navigation systems for military aircraft, Marcus told me one evening as we watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. 30 years of solving problems that kept people alive in impossible situations. Then my wife got sick, and everything I'd learned about engineering couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most. What happened to her?" I asked. "Ovarian cancer. By the time they caught it, treatment required experimental therapies that insurance wouldn't cover. We mortgaged the house, emptied retirement accounts, sold everything we owned. She lived 6 months longer than the doctors predicted, but it wasn't enough." We walked in silence for several minutes before Marcus continued. "After the funeral, I discovered we still owed $160,000 in medical debt. I lost the house, my credit, my savings, everything. At 60 years old, I was starting over with nothing but Social Security and whatever part-time work I could find." That's horrible. It is what it is. But here's what I learned from 30 years in aerospace: complex problems require systematic solutions. You don't fix a navigation system by randomly replacing parts. You analyze the problem, develop a plan, and execute it step by step. Marcus began teaching me business principles during our walks. He explained supply chain management using examples from military procurement. He taught me about market analysis by discussing how aircraft manufacturers identified customer needs. He broke down negotiation tactics he'd learned from dealing with Pentagon bureaucrats. Business is just engineering with people instead of machines, he said. Find out what people need, figure out how to give it to them better than anyone else, and price it so everyone wins. Simple concept, complex execution. Beth helped me enroll in online courses through the local community college. Business fundamentals, basic accounting marketing principles, and computer skills. I studied on the facility's shared computers during designated hours, taking notes in a spiral notebook I'd bought at the dollar store. The other residents noticed my academic focus and started bringing me questions about their own situations. Maria, a single mother recovering from addiction, asked me to help her understand the lease agreement for a potential apartment. James, a veteran dealing with PTSD, wanted advice about starting a landscaping business. Slowly, I realized I was developing a reputation as someone who could solve problems and explain complicated information in simple terms. It felt good to be useful again, to have skills that mattered to people. But the hardest part of recovery wasn't the medical treatment or the housing instability. It was the isolation from everyone I'd once cared about. Through social media stalking that I knew was unhealthy but couldn't stop, I watched my family's life continue without any sign that I'd ever existed. Amanda's Stanford photos showed her thriving academically and socially. She'd joined a sorority, made the dean's list, and was volunteering at a local hospital. My parents appeared in family weekend pictures, beaming with pride at their successful daughter. Then I discovered something that shattered me completely. Through a mutual friend's Facebook page, I found a post from 6 months earlier that made my blood run cold. It was a sympathy card from my high school class's Facebook group, expressing condolences to the Anderson family for the tragic loss of their son Larry in a car accident. My parents had told people I was dead. I screenshot the post and several similar ones, hands shaking, as I scrolled through comments from classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. So young, one wrote. Such a tragedy. Another, thinking of Robert and Susan during this difficult time. There was even a small memorial post with a photo of me from high school graduation, surrounded by digital flowers and condolences. Amanda had commented, "Thank you all for your kind words. It's been incredibly difficult, but we're supporting each other and healing together." They'd mourned me publicly while I fought for survival in isolation. That night, I sat on my narrow bed, staring at the screenshots until Marcus returned from his shift at the hardware store. He took one look at my face and sat down across from me. "What happened?" I showed him the posts without saying anything. Marcus read them carefully, his expression growing darker with each comment. "Son of a bitch," he said quietly. "They actually held a memorial service." According to this, Amanda was so devastated by my death that she needed counseling to cope with the grief. Meanwhile, I was coughing up blood in a Walmart parking lot. Marcus was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, he looked up at me with the kind of intensity I imagined he'd once brought to solving technical problems. "You know what this means, don't you? That my family is worse than I thought." "It means you're free," Marcus said. "Completely, totally free. They've burned every bridge, cut every tie, eliminated every obligation. You don't owe them anything anymore. Not love, not forgiveness, not even acknowledgement. That should feel good, but it just hurts. It hurts because you're still thinking like their son, but you're not their son anymore. You're Larry Anderson, sole proprietor of his own life. The question is, what are you going to build with that freedom?" I stared at the memorial post one more time, then closed the browser. "Something that matters," I said. "Something that proves they were wrong about everything." Marcus smiled for the first time since I'd known him. "Now you're thinking like an engineer. Let's start planning." Getting hired as a night custodian at TechFlow Solutions required lying on my application about my address and references, but Marcus helped me craft a story that was technically true without revealing my housing situation. The job paid $12 an hour, which was better than minimum wage, and started at 11 p.m. when the building was empty except for security guards and the occasional programmer working late. TechFlow occupied 3 floors of a gleaming office complex in central Phoenix. They provided software solutions for mid-sized businesses specializing in inventory management and customer relationship systems. During my interview, the facilities manager explained that previous custodians had problems with theft and unreliability, so they were looking for someone trustworthy who could work independently. "Can you pass a background check?" he asked, studying my application. "Yes, sir. No criminal record, no drug use." "Good. The position includes health insurance after 90 days, which is better than most janitorial jobs offer." Health insurance. The words hit me like a gift I hadn't dared hope for. My first night at TechFlow, the security guard William showed me around the building. William was in his late 50s, a former police officer who'd retired early after a back injury. He had the relaxed confidence of someone who'd seen enough real danger to know that corporate security was mostly about preventing petty theft and insurance liability. "Mostly quiet here," William explained as we walked through empty cubicles and conference rooms. "Programmers sometimes work late, but they're good people. Don't mess with their stuff and they won't bother you." The work itself was straightforward: vacuum carpets, empty trash, clean bathrooms, and sanitize common areas. But what made TechFlow different from other jobs was the access it gave me to observe how a successful business actually operated. While cleaning conference rooms, I'd see whiteboards covered with project timelines, revenue projections, and strategic planning notes. Marketing presentations left on tables showed me how they positioned their products and targeted customers. Financial reports in recycling bins revealed profit margins and growth challenges. I started taking pictures of interesting information with my phone, not to steal proprietary secrets, but to study how successful people approached business problems. At Desert Haven, I'd researched the companies and concepts I'd observed, building my understanding of corporate strategy and market dynamics. "You're working awful hard for a janitor," William observed one night, finding me in a conference room where I'd been studying a flow chart someone had drawn showing customer acquisition costs. "Just curious about how businesses work," I said, quickly putting down my phone. "Nothing wrong with curiosity. Most people who work here don't bother learning about anything outside their department. You might have potential beyond pushing a mop." William began sharing information during our brief conversations at shift changes. He told me about office politics, which departments were thriving, which projects were struggling, and how the leadership team made decisions. His police background had taught him to observe people and systems, and he'd been watching TechFlow's operations for 3 years. "Customer service is their weak point," he explained one evening. "They lose clients because their support system is antiquated and inefficient. Good products, but terrible follow-up." I started paying special attention to customer service operations. Their system was indeed a mess. Client complaints went through multiple departments before reaching anyone who could solve problems. Response times were slow and inconsistent. Representatives lacked access to comprehensive account histories, so customers had to repeat information multiple times. Using the business courses I was taking online and principles Marcus had taught me, I began developing ideas for improving TechFlow's customer service efficiency. Nothing revolutionary, just common sense solutions based on what I'd learned about workflow optimization and customer relationship management. Beth noticed changes in my attitude during our weekly meetings. "You seem more energetic lately, something good happening." "I think I found my direction," I told her. "Working at TechFlow is teaching me about business operations from the inside. I'm seeing how successful companies work and where they struggle." "That's excellent. Have you thought about approaching them with your observations?" "I'm just a janitor. They're not going to listen to someone who empties their trash cans." "Maybe not, but you'd be surprised how often good ideas come from unexpected sources. People in leadership positions sometimes lose sight of operational realities because they're too far removed from day-to-day execution." That conversation planted a seed that grew over several weeks. I began documenting TechFlow's customer service problems more systematically, creating a detailed analysis of inefficiencies and potential solutions. The report grew to 15 pages of observations, recommendations, and implementation strategies. Marcus reviewed my analysis during one of our evening walks, reading sections aloud, and asking pointed questions about feasibility and cost-effectiveness. "This is solid work," he concluded. "You've identified real problems and proposed realistic solutions. The question is whether you have the courage to present it. What if they fire me for overstepping boundaries? Mondri, what if they don't? You're making $12 an hour cleaning offices. That's survival, not a career. Sometimes you have to risk security for opportunity." The decision came easier than I expected. During a particularly busy night, I overheard a heated phone conversation between two executives about losing a major client due to service issues. The same problems I'd identified in my report had just cost TechFlow hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual revenue. I spent my lunch break writing a cover letter requesting a brief meeting to discuss operational efficiency opportunities. Professional, respectful, but confident enough to suggest my observations might have value, I left the report in the facilities manager's office with a note explaining that as someone who worked throughout the building, I'd noticed patterns that might be worth discussing. The response came faster than I'd anticipated. Jennifer Walker, the customer service manager, called me the next afternoon while I was sleeping between shifts. "Mr. Anderson, this is Jennifer Walker from TechFlow. I received your report about customer service operations." My heart pounded as I tried to sound professional despite being awakened from deep sleep. "Yes, ma'am, thank you for reviewing it. I'll be honest, I was skeptical when facilities forwarded this from a custodial employee, but your analysis is remarkably thorough and accurate. Would you be available to discuss your recommendations tomorrow afternoon?" The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. in a small conference room on the second floor. I arrived 15 minutes early wearing the only business casual outfit I owned, khakis, and a button-down shirt I'd bought at Goodwill for $12. Jennifer was a woman in her early 40s, with graying brown hair and the tired eyes of someone fighting daily battles with inefficient systems. She'd printed my report and covered it with highlighted sections and handwritten notes. "Before we start," she said, "I need to ask how a night custodian developed this level of insight into business operations." I gave her the abbreviated version business courses, previous retail experience, and observation during work hours. I didn't mention homelessness, tuberculosis, or family rejection. Those details wouldn't help my cause. "Your recommendations are practical and well-researched," Jennifer continued, "particularly the suggestion about integrated customer databases and automated escalation protocols. How would you implement these changes?" For the next hour, I walked through my proposals in detail, explaining how workflow modifications could reduce response times and improve customer satisfaction. Jennifer asked technical questions that pushed me to think deeper about practical challenges and resource requirements. "This is impressive work," she said finally. "But I have to ask, why bring this to us, instead of taking these ideas to another company or starting your own consulting business? Because I believe in what TechFlow is trying to accomplish, and I'd rather help improve something good than start from scratch somewhere else." That's when the conference room door opened unexpectedly, and Thomas Bradley walked in. I recognized him from company photos as TechFlow's CEO, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. "Sorry to interrupt," he said to Jennifer, "but I heard you were meeting with the employee who wrote that customer service analysis." My mouth went dry. This was either the best possible outcome or complete disaster. "Mr. Anderson." Jennifer said, "I'd like you to meet Thomas Bradley, our CEO." I stood and shook his hand, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "Nice to meet you, sir." "The pleasure's mine. Jennifer shared your report with me this morning. Quite impressive for someone with a custodial position. Mind if I sit in on your discussion?" For the next 30 minutes, I presented my analysis to TechFlow's CEO while trying not to think about the fact that 12 hours earlier, I'd been emptying his office trash can. Thomas asked challenging questions about implementation costs, staff training requirements, and projected return on investment. Your analysis suggests these changes could improve customer retention by 15 to 20% while reducing service costs, Thomas said. Those numbers would justify significant implementation investment. Yes, sir. The initial setup would require resources, but the long-term efficiency gains should pay for themselves within 18 months. Thomas exchanged glances with Jennifer before looking back at me. Mr. Anderson, what would you say to a trial position in our customer service department? We could implement your recommendations while you help manage the transition. The world suddenly felt very quiet, as if everyone in Phoenix had stopped breathing at the same time. I would say yes, sir. Absolutely yes. Thomas smiled. Jennifer, let's discuss salary and start date. I think Mr. Anderson might have more potential than his current job description suggests. Walking out of TechFlow that afternoon with a promised salary of $36,000 per year plus benefits, I felt like I was moving through a dream. It was more money than I'd ever imagined earning, with health insurance and opportunities for advancement in a company that actually valued innovative thinking. But the best part wasn't the money or the security. It was the knowledge that someone had looked at my work and seen value worth investing in. After years of being told I had no potential, I'd proven that assessment spectacularly wrong. Marcus was waiting when I returned to Desert Haven, sitting on his bed reading a paperback novel about aerospace engineering. I told him about the meeting and the job offer, watching his face transform from interest to pride, to something approaching paternal satisfaction. Damn, he said finally. From homeless tuberculosis patient to business consultant in 8 months. That might be a record. It's not consultant level yet, just customer service. It's a foothold, Marcus corrected. The first step up a ladder you're going to climb as high as you want. Question is, how high do you want to go? I thought about my family probably sharing dinner at some restaurant while discussing Amanda's latest achievements. They had no idea their worthless son was about to start rebuilding his life from absolutely nothing. High enough that when they see my name someday, they'll know exactly what they lost. Marcus grinned. Now you're thinking like someone who refuses to quit. Let's start planning the next phase. 18 months after starting in customer service, I was standing in Thomas Bradley's corner office, receiving a promotion to Vice President of Operations. The view from the 40th floor showed the entire Phoenix Valley stretching toward Purple Mountains, a landscape I'd once seen from Walmart parking lots during the worst period of my life. The transformation hadn't been gradual. Once I proved my customer service improvements could deliver measurable results, Thomas began assigning me increasingly complex challenges across different departments. Each success led to greater responsibilities and opportunities to demonstrate capabilities that surprised everyone, including myself. Your efficiency improvements have saved us $800,000 annually, Thomas explained, reviewing performance metrics on his computer screen. More importantly, client retention has increased 23%, and our customer satisfaction scores are the highest in company history. Thank you, sir. I've enjoyed the work. I'm sure you have, but I'm promoting you because TechFlow needs leaders who can see opportunities others miss. Your background gives you perspective that our MBA graduates lack. Thomas still didn't know the complete story of my background. He knew I'd experienced personal hardships and worked my way up from custodial positions, but I'd never shared details about homelessness or family rejection. Those experiences shaped my work ethic and problem-solving abilities, but they weren't professionally relevant to someone who judged performance by results. My new role included oversight of customer relations, vendor management, and operational efficiency across all departments. The salary jumped to $75,000 plus performance bonuses and stock options that could be worth significant money if TechFlow continued growing. More important than the money was the respect I'd earned from colleagues who initially viewed me as an unlikely success story. Jennifer Walker, who'd taken a chance on my customer service recommendations, now reported to me, and frequently sought my advice on strategic decisions. You have an intuitive understanding of systematic problems, she explained during one of our weekly meetings. Most people see symptoms, but you identify root causes and design comprehensive solutions. The work energized me in ways I'd never experienced. Every challenge was a puzzle to solve every inefficiency and opportunity to create value. I'd found my calling in the intersection of technology business strategy and human psychology that determined whether organizations succeeded or failed. My personal life was finally stabilizing too. I'd moved out of Desert Haven into a modest apartment with actual furniture and kitchen appliances. The refrigerator contained fresh food instead of leftover fast food, and I had a bed with a real mattress that didn't smell like other people's desperation. Rachel entered my life during TechFlow's annual charity fundraiser for homeless services. She was a nurse practitioner at the free clinic where I'd volunteered on weekends, drawn to give back to organizations that had supported me during my darkest period. "You look familiar," she said, approaching me at the volunteer check-in table. "Don't you work at TechFlow?" "I do. And you're the nurse who runs the tuberculosis treatment program at Desert Clinic." "You've been to the clinic." "Not as a patient recently. I volunteer there sometimes." Rachel had kind eyes and auburn hair that caught light beautifully when she laughed, which she did often during our conversation about healthcare challenges facing homeless populations. She was intelligent, compassionate, and genuinely interested in my perspectives on systemic solutions to poverty and health disparities. Our first date was dinner at a small Italian restaurant, where I told her about my business background and volunteer work, without mentioning my personal experience with homelessness. Not because I was ashamed, but because those details could overwhelm a developing relationship before people had time to see my current identity rather than my past circumstances. "What draws you to working with homeless services?" Rachel asked over pasta and wine. "I believe everyone deserves opportunities to rebuild their lives when circumstances go wrong. Most people experiencing homelessness aren't there because of character flaws, but because of medical debt, job loss, family crises, or other situations beyond their control." That's a mature perspective. Not everyone understands the complexity of how people end up on the streets. It's easier to blame individuals than examine systemic failures. I agreed, but sustainable solutions require addressing root causes rather than just managing symptoms. Rachel's expression suggested she found my analysis both thoughtful and attractive. We talked for 3 hours about healthcare policy, business ethics, and our shared interest in social justice initiatives. 6 months later, we were discussing moving in together. Rachel had met my colleagues and friends from TechFlow, but not my family, which required careful navigation when she asked about holiday plans. "My family relationships are complicated," I explained during a weekend hiking trip in the Superstition Mountains. "We're not in regular contact." "I'm sorry, that must be difficult." "It used to be. Now I focus on building my chosen family with people who share my values and support my goals." Rachel accepted this explanation without pushing for details, which demonstrated the kind of emotional intelligence that made our relationship work. She understood that everyone carries family complexities and respected boundaries while offering support for whatever healing processes I needed to manage privately. My chosen family included Marcus, who transitioned out of Desert Haven into his own apartment and part-time consulting work. Carlos had regained shared custody of his daughter and was building a successful landscaping business. Beth had become a friend rather than a social worker, someone I could call for advice about life decisions or just to share good news about professional victories. But the most satisfying relationship development was my evolving dynamic with Thomas Bradley. What had started as a traditional employer-employee arrangement had become something approaching mentorship, with Thomas sharing strategic insights about business leadership and long-term planning. "You have natural instincts for seeing market opportunities," Thomas told me during one of our quarterly reviews. Most people in operations focus on efficiency and cost reduction. You think about growth and innovation. I enjoy solving problems that haven't been solved before. That's why I'm grooming you for greater responsibilities. TechFlow needs leaders who can adapt to changing markets and identify new revenue streams. Thomas began including me in high-level strategic meetings with department heads and board members. I contributed analysis about operational capabilities and resource requirements for potential expansions into new markets or service offerings. During one particularly significant meeting, we discussed acquiring a smaller competitor that specialized in healthcare software solutions. The acquisition could expand TechFlow's market presence while leveraging our operational expertise to improve their efficiency and profitability. What's your assessment of integration challenges? Thomas asked me directly while board members and senior executives listened. The cultural fit looks strong based on their employee satisfaction surveys and retention rates. Their technology platforms are compatible with our existing infrastructure, so integration shouldn't require massive system overhauls. The main challenge would be harmonizing customer service protocols and ensuring their clients experience improved support rather than disruption during transition. Timeline for integration: 6 months for full operational integration, 12 months to realize projected efficiency gains and cost savings. The board approved the acquisition based partly on my operational assessment. 6 months later, when the integration exceeded projected timelines and cost targets, Thomas pulled me aside for a conversation that would change my career trajectory completely. Larry, I've been thinking about succession planning. I'm 62 years old and want to start transitioning toward retirement within 5 years. TechFlow needs leadership continuity, and you've demonstrated capabilities that impressed every board member. I'm honored by your confidence, sir. It's not confidence, it's recognition of proven performance. You've consistently delivered results that exceeded expectations while building respect from colleagues at every level. More importantly, you understand both operational realities and strategic vision. What are you proposing? Executive Vice President initially, with gradual assumption of CEO responsibilities as I reduce my involvement. Full transition within 5 years, assuming continued performance at current levels. Standing in Thomas's office, looking out at the city where I'd once slept in my car, I felt like I was living someone else's life. The kid who'd been thrown away for lacking potential was being offered leadership of a company worth $50 million. I accept, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Thomas smiled. I thought you might. Let's start planning the announcement. That evening, I called Marcus to share the news. He listened quietly while I described the conversation and promotion timeline, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. Have you considered whether you want your family to know about your success? Not really. Why would I? Because success without witnesses is just personal satisfaction. Victory requires an audience who understands what you've overcome. They chose their audience when they wrote me off. I don't need their validation. Maybe not validation, but closure. The chance to show them exactly how wrong they were about your potential. Marcus was right, but I wasn't ready to think about confronting my family. They'd moved on with their lives, and I'd built mine without them. Opening that wound felt like risking everything I'd built for uncertain emotional payoff. But life has a way of forcing confrontations whether you're ready or not. 2 weeks after my promotion announcement, while reviewing resumes for a new marketing position, I saw a familiar name that made my hands shake. Amanda Thompson, my sister, applying for entry-level work at the company I now helped lead. The universe apparently had a sense of irony. By my 26th birthday, TechFlow had grown from a regional software company to a major player in business solutions across the southwestern United States. The acquisition strategy I'd helped develop had succeeded beyond projections, with 3 successful integrations, adding $12 million in annual revenue while expanding our client base into healthcare manufacturing and financial services. Thomas Bradley's retirement plan was proceeding ahead of schedule. At his request, I'd assumed most day-to-day operational responsibilities while he focused on board relations and strategic partnerships. The transition felt natural with employees and clients accepting my leadership without the skepticism that might have accompanied someone with a traditional corporate background. "You've exceeded every performance metric we established," Thomas explained during my annual review. "Revenue growth, operational efficiency, employee satisfaction, and client retention have all reached historic highs under your leadership. I've had excellent support from department heads and staff. Success here has been collaborative." Spoken like a real CEO. You understand that leadership is about enabling others to do their best work, not micromanaging every decision. The CEO transition ceremony took place during TechFlow's 5th annual company meeting held at a downtown Phoenix hotel with 300 employees, clients, and industry partners in attendance. At 26 years old, I was officially the youngest chief executive in the software industry, according to Trade Technology Magazine's analysis. My acceptance speech focused on TechFlow's commitment to innovation, employee development, and community engagement rather than personal achievements. But privately standing at the podium, looking out at an audience that respected my leadership, I felt the enormous distance between where I'd started and where determination had brought me. "Leadership isn't about having all the answers," I told the audience. "It's about asking the right questions and creating environments where smart people can develop solutions together. TechFlow's success comes from our collective commitment to excellence and our willingness to support each other through challenges." The applause was genuine and sustained. These people believed in my vision for the company and trusted my ability to guide their professional futures. After years of being told I had no potential, I'd built something that mattered to hundreds of families and thousands of clients. Rachel sat in the front row, beautiful, in a blue dress that complemented her eyes. We'd gotten engaged 3 months earlier during a weekend trip to Sedona, and she'd been instrumental in helping me process the emotional complexity of achieving success that my original family would never witness or acknowledge. "I'm proud of you," she'd said after I proposed diamond ring reflecting sunset light off red rock formations. "Not because of your professional accomplishments, but because of the man you've chosen to become despite everything that tried to break you. You helped me become that man. I helped you recognize who you already were. The strength was always there." Our wedding was planned for the following spring, with a guest list that reflected the family I'd chosen rather than the one I'd been born into. Marcus would walk me down the aisle since Rachel's father had passed away 5 years earlier. Carlos and his daughter Sophia were flying in from Denver, where his landscaping business had expanded into commercial property management. Beth would officiate the ceremony, having gotten ordained specifically for our wedding. The only shadows over my happiness were the ones cast by unresolved family relationships and my growing curiosity about whether my success might change their perspective on the son they'd discarded. Through occasional social media reconnaissance, I'd learned that Amanda had left Stanford during her 3rd year, citing academic stress and uncertainty about career goals. She'd moved back home and was working part-time retail while supposedly exploring her options. My parents' posts about her had shifted from proud achievements to vague encouragement about finding her path. Robert's accounting practice had declined significantly as digital tax preparation services captured market share from traditional firms. Susan had returned to nursing part-time, supplementing their reduced income, while managing what appeared to be anxiety and depression based on cryptic posts about mental health journeys and therapy. The 3 of them lived in a smaller house in a less expensive neighborhood, driving older cars and shopping at discount stores. Their social media presence had decreased dramatically, suggesting reduced participation in the activities and communities that had once defined their identity. Part of me felt satisfaction at their diminished circumstances. They'd bet everything on Amanda's potential while writing off their son as worthless, and that investment had failed spectacularly. Justice had been served through natural consequences, rather than revenge. But another part of me, the part Rachel and Marcus had helped nurture, felt genuine sadness for people who'd lost so much through their own choices. Whatever they'd done to me, they were still human beings dealing with financial stress, professional disappointment, and family dysfunction. "Have you considered reaching out to them?" Rachel asked one evening while we planned seating arrangements for our wedding reception. "Not really. What would be the point?" "Closure, maybe. The chance to show them who you've become." They made it clear they didn't want to know who I could become. People change, Larry, especially when life humbles them the way it seems to have humbled your family. Some changes come too late? Maybe, but you'll never know unless you give them the opportunity to prove they've learned from their mistakes. I was still wrestling with Rachel's suggestion when TechFlow's Human Resources Department forwarded me a resume that made the decision for me. Amanda Thompson had applied for an entry-level marketing position using our parents' address and listing her incomplete Stanford education among her qualifications. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. The sister who'd been chosen over me was now seeking employment at the company I'd built from nothing. She had no idea that the CEO reviewing her application was the brother their family had declared dead 5 years earlier. I studied her resume for an hour, noting the gaps in employment, the unfinished education, the desperation that showed through carefully worded descriptions of minimal retail experience. This was the golden child who'd been worth destroying her brother's life to support. Amanda had requested an interview time of 2 p.m. on a Thursday, which I approved personally rather than delegating to HR. I wanted to control every aspect of our reunion, to manage the situation on my terms after years of being powerless in family dynamics. The morning of Amanda's interview, I sat in my corner office reviewing her application one more time and trying to decide what I wanted to accomplish. Revenge felt too simple, but forgiveness seemed premature. Justice required acknowledgement of wrongs, committed, but reconciliation needed genuine repentance from people who demonstrated little capacity for self-reflection. Marcus had advised me to focus on what I could control rather than what I hoped to achieve. "You can't force them to understand what they did wrong," he'd said. "But you can choose how you respond to the opportunity to show them who you've become." Rachel's counsel had been more direct. "Be the man I fell in love with, not the hurt child they abandoned. Your success speaks for itself, but your character will determine how this story ends." At 1:55 p.m., my assistant called to announce that Amanda Thompson had arrived for her interview. I asked for 5 minutes to prepare, then requested that she be sent to my office. The door opened, and Amanda walked in, wearing an ill-fitting suit that probably came from a discount store, carrying a worn briefcase that had seen better years. She looked older than her 23 years, with stress lines around her eyes, and the kind of carefully applied makeup that couldn't quite hide exhaustion. She stopped walking when she saw me behind the desk, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and shock before settling into something like disbelief. "Larry," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the large office. "Hello, Amanda. Please have a seat. Let's discuss your qualifications for this position." Amanda stood frozen in the doorway for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes, staring at me, as if I were a ghost who'd materialized in an expensive suit behind a mahogany desk. Her briefcase slipped from numb fingers and hit the carpet with a soft thud that seemed to break whatever spell had paralyzed her. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "How are you here? Mom and Dad said you died in a car accident. We had a memorial service. Did you?" I kept my voice professionally neutral, gesturing toward the chair across from my desk. "Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss." Amanda moved like she was walking underwater, settling into the leather chair while never taking her eyes off my face. She looked thin, tired, and desperate, in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of my own appearance during the worst months at Desert Haven. "You're really alive?" she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Very much so, though I understand why you might be confused. given what our parents told people about my death. I opened her resume on my computer screen, projecting calm authority despite the emotional storm inside my chest. Now let's review your qualifications for this marketing position. Larry, I can't do a job interview right now. I'm in shock. You're supposed to be dead. I'm supposed to be many things according to our parents. Dead, worthless, lacking potential. But here we are. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face the way I'd once studied business problems that needed solving. You applied for this position, Amanda. I'm offering you the professional courtesy of an interview. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara slightly. You're the CEO. I saw your name in the Business Journal articles, but I never connected it. Anderson is such a common name. It is, and apparently in our parents' version of reality, there are no living Andersons named Larry. They said you died in Colorado, a car accident on a mountain road. Mom was devastated for months. Was she? I felt something cold and sharp twist in my stomach. Interesting. When exactly did this fictional accident occur? About 6 months after you left home. Dad said you'd been working construction and driving back from a job site when it happened. Convenient timing, right around when I was in the hospital with tuberculosis trying to get them to visit me before I died for real. Amanda's face went white. Tuberculosis. Oh God, Larry, were you really that sick? I was homeless, Amanda, living in my car, eating from dumpsters, working for minimum wage, while our parents used my inheritance to fund your Stanford education. The tuberculosis nearly killed me. I didn't know about the inheritance, she said quickly. They told me it was their money. Of course they did. Just like they told people I was dead instead of admitting they'd thrown their son away like garbage. Amanda broke down completely, then sobbing into her hands while I watched from behind my desk. 5 years ago, her tears might have moved me to comfort her. Now they felt like just another manipulation, conscious or unconscious, from someone who'd learned early that being beautiful and fragile could solve problems that required other people to sacrifice. I'm sorry, she said through tears. I'm so sorry, Larry. I should have stood up for you. I should have questioned what they were doing. Should have, could have, would have. The past is fixed, Amanda. I'm more interested in the present. Why are you here applying for entry-level marketing work when you were supposed to become a doctor? She took a shaky breath, trying to compose herself. I left Stanford. The pressure was too much, and I kept thinking about you. After we heard about the accident, I couldn't concentrate on anything. My grades fell apart, and I lost my scholarship. So you came home to live with the parents who'd already proven they'd sacrifice one child's future for another's. I didn't have anywhere else to go, and I thought maybe I could help them financially since they'd spent so much on my education. How did that work out? Amanda's laugh was bitter and hollow. Terrible. Dad's business is failing because he can't adapt to technology. Mom had to go back to nursing, but she's having anxiety attacks at work. I've been working retail for 2 years, making barely enough to cover my student loan payments. Student loans, I thought you had a full scholarship. I did for tuition. But living expenses, medical school preparation, study abroad programs, all the extras they said I needed to be competitive. We borrowed against the house for those. I felt a grim satisfaction that their investment in the golden child had backfired so completely. They'd mortgaged everything for Amanda's potential and gotten nothing but debt and disappointment in return. So now you need a job, I said, and you happen to apply at the company run by the brother you thought was dead. I didn't know it was your company, I swear, Larry. I just needed work, and TechFlow has a good reputation for employee development. It does. We invest in people who show potential and work ethic. The question is whether you qualify for that investment. Amanda straightened in her chair, trying to shift into interview mode, despite the surreal circumstances. I know I don't have traditional marketing qualifications, but I'm willing to learn. I'm reliable, hardworking, and I understand what it's like to struggle. Do you tell me about your struggles, Amanda? Being the perfect daughter was harder than it looked, Everyone expected me to be brilliant, beautiful, successful at everything. The pressure was constant. That must have been difficult, I said without sympathy. Having parents who believed in you, invested in you, and expected greatness. What a burden. She flinched at my tone. You're angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, but anger is unproductive in business contexts. Let me ask you directly, do you think you deserve the preferential treatment our parents gave you? No, she said quietly. I knew it was wrong even then. But I was 18 and scared, and I didn't know how to fight them. Scared of what? Of losing their love the way you did. The honesty in her answer surprised me. For the first time in our conversation, Amanda sounded like she was telling the truth, rather than managing my reactions. So you chose complicity over courage. Yes, I was a coward. I let them destroy your life because I was afraid they'd destroy mine too. I studied her face looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But what I saw was genuine shame and regret from someone who'd learned that complicity with injustice eventually costs everyone involved. Where are our parents now, Amanda? At home. Dad is semi-retired because his client base has shrunk so much. Mom works 3 days a week at a pediatric clinic. They're struggling financially and emotionally. Do they ever talk about me? Not really. It's like you never existed, except sometimes I catch Mom looking at your high school graduation picture when she thinks no one is watching. They kept my graduation picture. It's in their bedroom, along with your little league trophies and the certificate you got for perfect attendance in 8th grade. All the things they used to be proud of before they decided you weren't worth loving anymore. The image of my mother secretly mourning the son she'd helped discard hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent years building emotional armor against their rejection, but learning they'd preserved evidence of loving me once created cracks in my defenses. If I hired you, I said, changing the subject before Amanda could see how her words affected me, what would you tell our parents about where you work? Whatever you want me to tell them. That's not an answer. What do you think I should want you to tell them? Amanda was quiet for a long time thinking. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. I think you should tell them yourself. When you're ready on your terms. You've built something incredible here, Larry. You're successful, respected, and obviously good at what you do. They deserve to know how wrong they were about you. And if I'm never ready, then that's your choice to make. You don't owe them anything. I opened her resume on my computer and pretended to review it while actually thinking about Marcus's advice to focus on what I could control. I could control this moment, this decision, this opportunity to show grace or exact revenge. I'll offer you the position, I said finally. Entry-level marketing associate, $35,000 per year plus benefits. Standard 90-day probationary period. Amanda's eyes widened. Really? With conditions. First, you'll be evaluated solely on performance. Family relationships won't protect you from professional consequences if you don't meet expectations. Second, you can't tell our parents where you work until I decide otherwise. Third, you'll attend counseling to address family dysfunction issues that might impact your work performance. I accept all those conditions. Good. Report to HR tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for orientation. They'll assign you to Jennifer Walker's team. Amanda stood up, still looking dazed by the conversation's outcome. Thank you, Larry. I know I don't deserve this chance. You're right, you don't. But I'm not giving you this chance because you deserve it. I'm giving it to you because I choose to be better than the people who raised us. She paused at the door, looking back at me with something like admiration. I'm glad you survived everything they put you through. And I'm proud of who you became. I'm proud of who I became too, I said. But it happened despite our family, not because of them. After Amanda left, I sat in my office, staring out at the Phoenix skyline and thinking about the conversation I'd eventually need to have with our parents. Part of me wanted to orchestrate a dramatic revelation that would force them to confront their failures as human beings. But another part, the part Rachel and Marcus had helped nurture, wanted something more complex than simple revenge. 3 months later, I had my answer. TechFlow's annual charity gala raised money for homeless services throughout Arizona. As CEO, I gave the keynote speech about second chances and the importance of supporting people during their most vulnerable moments. The audience included employees, clients, community leaders, and special guests. Amanda had proven herself a capable employee who worked harder than anyone expected, probably trying to demonstrate that she was worthy of the opportunity I'd given her. Her performance reviews were solid, and she'd developed genuine friendships with coworkers who had no idea about our family connection. On the night of the gala, I'd arranged for Amanda to invite our parents as her guests, telling them only that her employer was honoring community volunteers and she wanted them to see her workplace success. They had no idea they'd be hearing their supposedly dead son deliver a speech about overcoming adversity. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of 400 people, I found Robert and Susan Anderson sitting near the back of the room next to Amanda. They looked older than I'd expected, smaller, somehow wearing clothes that suggested careful attention to a limited budget. 5 years ago, I began. I was homeless, sick, and completely alone. The people who should have supported me during the lowest point of my life had decided I was worth less than nothing. They erased me so completely that they told friends and family I had died. I saw the exact moment when recognition hit my parents. Robert's face went ashen, and Susan grabbed his arm with both hands, staring at the stage in shock and disbelief. But homelessness taught me something valuable about human potential. The people society discards often have the most to offer if someone is willing to invest in their capabilities rather than judge them by their circumstances. I told my story without naming my family, describing the journey from sleeping in cars to building a successful company. The audience listened with growing emotional engagement, particularly the employees who had no idea their CEO had overcome such obstacles. Okay, success isn't about where you start, I concluded. It's about refusing to let other people's limitations define your possibilities. Everyone deserves the chance to prove their worth, especially when they've been told they have none. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but I was watching my parents, who sat frozen in their seats, while 300 people applauded the success story of the son they'd written off as worthless. After the speech, I made my way through the crowd accepting congratulations and thank yous from community leaders and employees. When I finally reached my parents' table, Robert and Susan were sitting in stunned silence while Amanda watched them with obvious concern. "Mom, Dad," I said, stopping beside their table. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Larry Anderson, CEO of TechFlow Solutions." Susan started crying immediately, tears streaming down her face, as she looked up at me in my tailored suit and successful life. Robert seemed incapable of speech, staring at me, as if I were a mirage that might disappear if he blinked. "You're alive," Susan whispered. "You're alive and you're..." "Successful?" I suggested. "Respected, worth something after all." "We thought you were dead," Robert said hoarsely. "We held a memorial service." "I know, I've seen the social media posts. Very touching eulogies for the son you discarded." Other gala attendees were starting to notice our conversation, so I suggested we move to a private conference room. Amanda followed us, looking nervous about the confrontation she'd helped orchestrate. In the privacy of the conference room, my parents finally broke down completely. Susan sobbed into her hands while Robert stared at the floor, probably calculating the magnitude of their mistake in accountant terms. "We were wrong," Robert said finally. "We were so wrong about everything." "Yes, you were. The question is whether you understand why you were wrong." "We thought Amanda was our best investment," Susan said through tears. "We thought you'd never amount to anything significant. And now we see that we destroyed the wrong child's future," Robert said bitterly. "No," I corrected. "You tried to destroy my future. But you failed because my worth was never dependent on your opinion. You succeeded in destroying your relationship with your son, but I built my life without you." Amanda spoke for the first time since we'd entered the room. "They've been miserable for years, Larry. The guilt has eaten them alive." "Good," I said, without sympathy. "Guilt is the appropriate emotional response to destroying your child's life for arbitrary reasons." "What do you want from us?" Robert asked. "How can we make this right?" "You can't. The time for making it right was 5 years ago when I was sick and homeless and begging you to care whether I lived or died." "But we can try," Susan said desperately. "We can apologize. We can acknowledge our mistakes publicly. We can work to repair our relationship." I looked at these two people who'd given me life and then tried to take it away through neglect and rejection. They were older now, diminished by their own choices, humbled by consequences they'd never anticipated. Part of me wanted to reject their pleas the way they'd rejected mine. But Rachel's voice echoed in my mind, reminding me to be the man she'd fallen in love with, rather than the hurt child they'd abandoned. "Here's what's going to happen," I said finally. "You're going to attend family counseling to understand why you treated your children like investment portfolios instead of human beings. You're going to apologize publicly for lying about my death. And you're going to earn forgiveness through consistent actions over time, not through words and promises." "And if we do those things," Susan asked hopefully, "then maybe eventually you'll get to know the man you almost prevented me from becoming. But that's my choice to make, based on whether you can prove you've actually changed rather than just learn to fear consequences." Robert looked up at me with something approaching respect. "You have every right to reject us completely." "I do, but I'm choosing a different path, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve the peace that comes from acting on my values rather than my pain." 6 months later, my parents were in the front row at my wedding, to Rachel sitting next to Marcus and Beth and the other people who'd helped me build a life worth living. The reconciliation process had been slow and difficult, filled with setbacks and painful conversations about accountability and change. But gradually, Robert and Susan had done the work necessary to understand their failures and commit to different choices going forward. They attended counseling individually and as a family acknowledged their mistakes to friends and community members and began supporting other parents dealing with similar challenges. Amanda had thrived at TechFlow, earning 2 promotions and developing expertise in community outreach programs. She'd also started volunteering at Desert Haven, working with residents who reminded her of her brother during his darkest period. "I can't undo what our parents did to you," she told me during one of our weekly check-ins after family counseling sessions. "But I can try to help other people who've been written off by families that should have protected them." "That's a good start," I agreed. Making amends isn't about fixing the past. It's about choosing to be better in the future. Standing with Rachel on our wedding day, surrounded by the chosen family I'd built through shared struggles and mutual support, I understood that success isn't measured by defeating people who wronged you. True victory comes from becoming someone worthy of respect regardless of other people's opinions or failures. My parents had tried to write my story for me, deciding I was worth less than my sister and discarding me when I didn't meet their arbitrary standards. But stories don't end when other people stop reading them. They continue until the protagonist chooses to put down the pen. I'd chosen to write a story about resilience growth and the kind of success that lifts other people up rather than tearing them down. The family that had rejected me was welcome to witness that story's conclusion, but they were no longer its authors. The boy they'd thrown away had become a man they could finally respect, not because he'd proven them wrong, but because he'd refused to let their limitations define his possibilities. And that I realized as I kissed my wife while my chosen family applauded was the sweetest victory of all. Has anyone in your family ever made you feel like you weren't good enough or told you that you lacked potential? How did you prove them wrong, or what steps are you taking to build the life you deserve? Despite their doubt, I'd love to hear your stories of overcoming family rejection and building success on your own terms in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about resilience and personal growth, and share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that other people's opinions don't determine your worth. Thank you for taking this journey with me. And remember that your potential is defined by your choices and determination, not by the people who failed to see your value. Here's to building lives that matter, regardless of who believes in us along the way.